Author, Firehead, Translator, Hand of Vecna Editors, TPSTT, Key. https://handofvecna.blogspot.com. It was a strange feeling. She didn't feel like she had changed in any dramatic way. It didn't make her feel more exhilarated. She even thought that nothing had really changed. But she could see them. Until now, her eyes had been having difficulty following Terra's movements as well as Castor's battle. The three-winged knights were now clearly visible as they were beaten down and moved to reposition themselves in mid-air. Furthermore, Sol, who had flown through the front line to attack and stop Parthinos, was now completely in her field of vision. I won't let you. She flapped her wings and came in between them, blocking Sol's fist with La Pucelle. She felt a strong impact, but it didn't feel as strong as she had expected. She should have been unable to stop the blow and been easily blown away instead. That was what she thought, but despite being pushed back, she had successfully stopped Sol's fist. What? There was a look of astonishment on Sol's face, and the unexpected result caused him to ease his exertion. At that moment, Terra flew in from the side and sliced off Sol's forearm with his sword. However, Sol immediately regenerated the wound and counterattacked Terra. A wall of light appeared between them and his fist bounced off it. Sol wasn't the only one surprised at this scene. Terra was shocked as well. Even if someone was at level 1000 and launched a surprise attack, it wouldn't be easy to completely block Sol's attack. At least, it would be impossible for an ordinary level 1000 character. If anyone could perform such a feat, it would be someone like Rupaz, Migrez, or Merak, who had stepped beyond the realm of level 1000. In other words, it was the realm of those who were dissatisfied with level 1000 and strengthened themselves beyond their limits. There was no reason for Virgo, who had just inherited her power, to be at that level. Even Parthinos, who had given her the power, wasn't in that realm, so why was this happening? Yeah. What's with this person? It would be a bit inappropriate to call it a flying leap. As if she had unleashed her potential which had been suppressed until now, Virgo pursued Sol with her sword. Even so, Sol was still stronger, especially when it came to melee combat. Virgo had certainly become stronger, but she still lacked combat experience. Even if her level had exceeded that of her predecessor, her expertise was still different. She couldn't use skills continuously at the cheat-like speed that Parthinos could. She also couldn't instantly select the optimal skills to use like Parthinos could. But Terra was here, as well as Castor and the three-winged knights. There was a mysterious awakening that accompanied Virgo's inheritance of power. In addition, there was also a difference in numbers. Even for Sol, this wasn't easy to deal with, but he still laughed fearlessly. This is the battle I wanted. A worthy struggle is what I desired. The odds were now 50-50. It was finally even at this point. Sol's power was so great that it was reminiscent of Rupaz. Terra looked grim as he realized this fact. Meanwhile, Sol was laughing happily. Sol's knife hand strike collided with Terra's blade, creating sparks. Both of them then vanished at the same time. Above. When Luna S.H.I did her line of sight, Sol and Terra had already crossed their fist and sword, Vanas.H.I+NG immediately after. When she thought they would appear on the left, they had already shown up on the right. Trees fell from the resulting shockwaves. When the dust rose up for a moment, she thought Terra had landed, but it was Sol who had crashed into the rocks. Luna could only catch up with the afterimages left behind after the fight, but Virgo could just barely follow the actual fight. Naturally, the three-winged knights and Castor could as well. Demonic SLAs.H. Plus Terra unleashed the advanced skill Demonic Slash and a blue sword pressure flew towards Solution facing an attack that could cut apart a mountain. Sol clenched his fist. The grappler skill Smash was a simple but powerful skill that would always deal a critical hit. His fist was slightly torn by the sword pressure, but the fist pressure had cancelled out the blue slash. In that instant, Terra gripped his sword with both hands and swung it down from above with all his might. As the name might imply, Meteor Rush was among the most powerful swordmaster skills and could only be used once every 24 hours. It released an intimidating feeling as if it was a meteor destroying everything on the ground. At the same time, Sol clenched his fist and swung upwards towards the sky. This was Buster Impact, a skill which could also only be used once every 24 hours. It had a similar effect. It was basically a grappler's version of Meteor Rush. Skills that had reached the maximum limit in terms of damage were not so useful at high levels. Instead, continuous damage was generally preferred to single burst damage, even if the former was less powerful. Nevertheless, these skills were powerful enough that even a level 100 character who had mastered them could deal damage that was 5 digits. Their destructive power was immeasurable. Explosions resounded as the shockwaves spread across the continent, centering on Alfheim. The sudden shockwaves caused tragedies as old buildings in nearby villages collapsed. Even the people who were further away were blown away by the winds. The two of them in the center of the vortex were blown away at the same time. Sol rebounded off the ground and rolled at the same time before landing. Terra, who was also blown away, thrusted his sword into the ground and managed to stop his body after SLAs.H.I plus NG a straight line on the ground. Not bad, son of the moon Ouroboros. I didn't think this would be so much fun. Does your power stem from your anger towards me for deceiving you? No, I was deceived because of my immaturity. I'm ashamed of my incompetence. I don't hate you for it. The distance between them widened and they returned to staring at each other. Sol adjusted his breathing as he spoke and Terra answered honestly. However, they remained wary of each other and left no openings. I fight to protect my people. I use my sword to protect their future. I see. That's the model answer of a knight. But have you forgotten the true nature of the people whom you're trying to protect? It's all a dream. They're simply arcane magic of the G.O.Dis, dolls in the shape of humanoids. Is there any value in their future? Don't you think that disappearing according to the roles they were given would be better for the world? Sol sneered as he questioned Terra's justice and his reason to fight, trying to cause him to waver. However, Terra did not waver. His sword was not swayed by his words in any way. You're right, but we demons can laugh like humanoids. We can cry like them too. We can share our joy and love with others. Just because we were created by magic doesn't mean we can simply be unilaterally erased. But you people are the invaders of the humanoids. Did you forget the sins you have committed in the past? I remember and I will never forget. I killed many people in order to protect my people. Certainly, I'm a sinner from the humanoids' perspective. But are the demons who never went to the battlefield sinners too? Are those who were forced to dirty their hands in order to survive evil? If that's what you hoped for, do those people who were forced to do so also have to be judged? As he spoke, Terra recalled all those people whom he had killed. The past, in which he had cut down and killed the brave humanoid warriors who had challenged him, could never be erased. No matter how he tried to justify it, he had cut down the humanoids as enemies in order to protect his own people. It couldn't be excused just because it was a war. Certainly, he was a sinner who had willingly stepped onto the battlefield and willingly killed others. Therefore, if that was to be called a sin, he would freely admit his own sin. If they could find a way to reincarnate the demons, they could laugh together with the humanoids of the world. If such a future came to PAS.S, at that time, he would ask the people to judge him. At that time, he would bear all of the infamy as the last of the accursed demons and stand on the execution grounds. He had been ready for this ever since he had first held a sword in his hand. Since the very first time he had killed someone, he had believed that he would die miserably someday. But that was all for the sake of paving the way for tomorrow. Even if he wouldn't be part of that future as long as she was still alive, it would be enough. Then I will sever that accursed fate with my sword. We'll be the last of the demons to walk this accursed path. For the sake of living together without killing each other, for the future of my people, I'll fight. His sword wasn't clouded by doubt. There was no hesitation in his eyes. His armor reflected the sunlight that was S.H.I plus Ning from the sky, while his cloak was flapping as if to present the image of a N.O.Bli swordsman. This complicated the feelings of the 12 stars, who had been previously hostile to him. No, they were in fact still hostile. They couldn't consider what Terra had said to be a convenient excuse of an invader. After all, Rupas, the master of the 12 stars, was the same as him. She had also killed her enemies for the sake of peace. She had ruthlessly erased them. If all of her enemies were killed down to the last person, peace would finally come. She was running barefoot on a THO.R.N.Y path, dyeing it red with her own blood. Oh, how ironic. The people who were seeking peace were killing each other. That's why they should have been pleased. However, it just complicated their feelings. Hey, elder brother. Could that child be the next hero or something? No, the hero is somebody else. SEI, the one who came from the world called J.A. Castor mistakenly thought that J.A. Pan is the name of the world itself, and not simply a country, is the current hero. Would that be the unreliable kid who's bringing along a tiger, a cat, and a gorilla beastkin? Yes, it's that unreliable youth who's bringing along a tiger, a cat, and a gorilla beastkin. He's the hero. Apparently. What exactly is the hero? While the Twilight Fairy siblings were talking, the battle between Sol and Terra had intensified before them. They seemed to be evenly matched. But with the difference in numbers, it wouldn't be surprising if the balance was lost at any moment. Sol was enjoying the struggle with a joyful expression. However, the person behind Sol didn't enjoy it as much as he did. She decided to ensure victory by helping Solution. A third party who couldn't read the mood had intervened. This is not good. Holy power emanated from Sol's body, increasing the pressure exerted by his presence. There was no doubt that the G.O.Dis had interfered. Sensing this, both Castor and Sol shouted at the same time. Bad. This is really bad. Castor merely felt threatened by Sol's increasing power. It was Sol himself who had a greater sense of danger than anyone else. This was a move that shouldn't have been made. G.O.Dis, stop. This, too late. She's too hasty to end the fight, huh? In contrast to Sol's anxiety, Pollux spoke softly. At the same time, Parthinos removed the sealing ring from Pollux's finger. The G.O.Dis.A.S.Sistans was really great, but that also meant that her consciousness had moved over to Sol. In other words, she was revealing that she could no longer possess Pollux for now, which was what they had been worried about. It was a really stupid move. Gather, my beloved children, come, return of the heroic spirits, Argonautai. A pillar of light rose from Pollux's body and penetrated the sky. The sky tore apart and light shone down. And the heroes who had died began to descend from between the clouds. In response to the call of the fairy princess, they prepared their weapons one after another. Victory had been decided. If the fairy siblings summoned all of the heroes at the same time, there were only a few in Midgard who could prevail against them. Sol clicked his tongue as he realized that his fun time was over. Even if he stayed here, only death would result. Looks like this is as far as I go. If all of the ancient heroes are gathered like this, even I won't be able to win. Well, whatever. In that case, I'll just deal with the heroes of the current generation first. Besides, the objective has already been met. Sol left behind a disturbing statement and turned to leave the location. Castor quickly directed some heroes to pursue him, but it would be difficult for them to catch up if Sol made a serious attempt to escape. After witnessing his perfect escape, Pollux clicked her tongue and raised her opinion of him in her heart. He wasn't just strong. He had good judgment too. That was a rather annoying opponent. Once he saw that he couldn't win, he quickly withdrew before the exits were blocked. He's rather difficult, isn't he? A discerning opponent is the most troubling. A bothersome person has appeared. Pollux and Parthinos frankly acknowledged how bothersome Sol was and commended him for it. Their victory this time was due to the G.O.Dis who had left an opening in her desperation to win. Otherwise, there would have surely been casualties regardless of whether they attained victory or defeat. Even so, Sol's last words were rather troubling. Was it a bluff? The Ouroboros showed no sign of movement. It seemed to still be asleep. Furthermore, the current heroes he mentioned should be referring to the 7 heroes, but that was probably a trap. The goal was likely to disperse their forces while they rushed to protect the 7 heroes. Pollux didn't notice. The Earth Ouroboros, who slept underground, opened its eyelids once, and closed them immediately. Pisces https://handofvecna.blogspot.com The ocean. It was the mother who brought forth life and also a world of mysteries. There were civilizations in the ocean which were different from those of the humanoids on land. The merfolk, also called the fishfolk, were sea dwellers with high intelligence and combat power. The females had upper bodies resembling humans and the lower bodies of a fish. The males had the opposite appearance and were classified as demi-humans in the current world. Furthermore, the merfolk were broadly divided into two types: those who wanted to be treated as humanoids by the people on land and those who separated themselves from the people on land in order to live in the paradise of the sea. The former were those who followed Leon, while the latter lived in Skplanir. Skplanir, Old Norse, assembled from thin pieces of wood, is the finest h.i+p in Norse mythology. It was owned by Freyr and could be folded like a cloth and placed within one's pocket, the kingdom of the sea. In this underwater kingdom, beautiful mermaids swam in crystal-clear waters, while mermen with harpoons went out to hunt. About half of the buildings were towers. The windows were mostly open and merfolk entered and exited through them. Although they were towers, they had no stairs. The merfolk could freely move up, down, left, and right, so it was enough to simply have holes connecting s.p.a.ces. They were built on the a.s. assumption that three-dimensional movement was possible. It couldn't be done by humans on land. Instead of using vehicles for transportation, the merfolk used orvers at 30 meters long. An orver would be about the size of a blue whale. On the other hand, an orca, also called killer whale, is only about 5 to 8 meters long, a species of magical beasts which had mutated from orcas. Even the young could reach a length of 10 meters. If it was a huge specimen, it could grow up to 30 meters. These magical beasts had very high combat power and intelligence, but they were also known for being friendly to people and easy to domesticate. In addition, there were also small creatures called dolphins that lived alongside the orvers. This species were originally dolphins which had been domesticated and living with the merfolk for many years. Eventually, they underwent dwarfism and became pets. Selective breeding had resulted in many different kinds of dolphins. On the other hand, abandoned dolphins, which had been thrown away by owners who were tired of raising them, had also become a social problem. In this city of the sea, there was a particularly large building. It was a huge palace constructed of pure gold and crystals, from which the king of the merfolk ruled over the city of the sea. Only beautiful mermaids worked in the palace. No merman worked there. Furthermore, all the mermaids had blonde or vermilion hair, which were uniformly long. Deep within the palace, there was a room which glittered with the most tasteless fuzz.h.i+ on. Decorated with crystal accessories and surrounded by beautiful mermaids, the only male within the palace sat on a throne which appeared to be a large she.l.l at first glance. Unbelievably, he was the only male in this city of the sea who was unlike the other mermen, because he had a completely human body. Both his upper body and lower body were completely human and covered in a fluttering hagoromo, literally feather dress, is a colored or feathered kimono, usually worn by a heavenly maiden. In some legends, the heavenly maiden is unable to fly and return to heaven without it like costume. His blonde hair was completely combed back, while his sharp blue eyes hinted at his arrogant personality. He had a mole on his forehead, which could be considered an exquisite feature. He looked like he was in his early 20s. His slender, well-toned body was exposed as he was waited upon by the females. He was the king of the sea. In a sense, his dominance over the vast sea implied that he was the ruler of the largest territory in Midgard. Presently, a young mermaid, who was probably a messenger, came and bowed. "Your Majesty, I'd like to make a report. The descendants of those who went on land have gone missing." "Ah, those idiots who decided to follow Leon, eh? What a bunch of fools, they should have just lived under my protection. Why did they even want to be treated equally by those who are satisfied with the narrow world on land? Why should anybody care what the lower life forms think?" Without hiding his contempt, the king mocked them. In his eyes, the 7 humanoid races were inferior species. No, not just the humanoids. Everything that lived in this world were lower life forms to him. They were just a pale imitation of the G.O.Dis. There were only two beings who were truly precious in this world. Needless to say, one was himself, the perfect being, the pinnacle of beauty, and the son of the G.O.Dis. The other was a lovely woman who was born of a lower species but had said it all to become one of a kind in this world. At one rank below, the Ouroboroses, the fairy princess, and the demon king would barely qualify to be admitted. He looked at the messenger girl and stared at her limbs as if licking them without hiding his lust. What else? Yes. A few people who claim to have business with your majesty are shouting outside the palace. Business with me? Where did these rude people come from? I don't know. I have never seen them before. There is a feminine golem and an old human who wears a monocle, a feminine golem and an old human who wears a monocle. Listening to the girl's report, two figures who didn't give him good impressions flashed across the king's mind. One was a killer-made golem which, although she had a decent appearance, was ultimately nothing more than a beautiful object. The other was a crazy goat devil. He would never forget them. He didn't have a good impression of them because whenever they spoke to him, they always used that abominable name. I see. By the way, aren't you an unfamiliar face? I'm Sure Tigas, an apprentice who has just started working here the other day. This time, I'm acting on behalf of the messenger who is sick. It wasn't unusual for him to not know about a newcomer. To put it bluntly, she was just someone at the bottom ranks. It would be too disrespectful to bother the king with reports about every single apprentice. One would be introduced only after they had finished their training and could properly serve by themselves. Still, there was actually a separate facility for training purposes, so only those who were deemed capable were allowed to come here. However, the king didn't pursue the matter further. Her face looks a bit young, but her hair color is the same. The girl's hair was blonde, becoming vermilion at the tips. This was the same color as that woman whom he acknowledged as his equal and fell in love with. In fact, all the females who served in the palace had something in common with her. There was nothing much to it. This man was simply making a harem of women who were similar to his unrequited love. For him, it was essential for the hair color to be a perfect match. Anyway, let's get rid of those shouting fools. Yorsura, is it? I have decided. Tonight, you will be my partner. Be honored. The king grinned disgustingly at his unexpected partner for the night. The girl, who was specified, blushed and lowered her head. Such a fresh reaction. I have only been dealing with experienced women so far, but it might be fun to have an inexperienced virgin every once in a while. However, the king's despicable thoughts were blown away in the next moment. The entrance was blown away and the door landed a direct hit on him. I've come to intrude in a dynamic Foz.H.I+ on. Is the perverted narcissist Eros at home? Playing king of the hill in a palace full of women? He's still a man with bad taste. While saying so, a steel-made golem came in along with an intellectual-looking old gentleman who was actually of the radical faction. The surrounding mermaids were stunned by their crude and disrespectful entrance. It was only natural. After all, he was the king. It was unheard of for him to be smacked with the door. It's not Eros. It's Pisces, you fools. The king yelled at the two of them. The tyrannical 12 stars, Pisces of the fish real name, Eros pushed aside the broken door and jumped up without hiding his annoyance. Image from Light Novel Volume 7. Author's notes. Terra, I fight to pave the way for tomorrow. SEI, what a heroic aura. Who is the real hero? The G.O.Dis, Omega. Soul, useless trash. Dina, my true form really cannot make it. I need to do something soon. Who is the real mastermind? Author, Firehead, Translator, Hand of Vecna Editors, TPSTT, Key. https://handofvecna.blogspot.com. I just detected a reaction that's similar to Eros Mana. It looks like he's below here. They had been flying through the sky on the Argo for some time, but Libra's words caused the S.H.I+P to stop. Hearing this, Rupaz leaned out of the S.H.I+P, but the vast sea extended as far as her eyes could see. She narrowed her eyes and concentrated to see if he was somewhere on the spa.r.s.ely scattered islands, but she couldn't find anyone anywhere. Under normal conditions, Ruppes had a visual acuity. Visual acuity is a measurement of one's clarity of vision. A normal human vision has a visual acuity of 1.066. A visual acuity of 12.06/0.5 means she can discern the contours of an object at 6 meters while a normal human can do so only at 0.5 meter. Of 12.0, allowing her to distinguish the silhouette of an insect less than 1 centimeter at a distance of 20 meters. If she were to use arcane power to create a lens of light in front of her eyes, she could see even further. 2 lenses would be created. Mono would be used to create an object lens. An objective, also called object lens, is the optical element that gathers light from the object being observed and focuses the light rays to produce a real image. And an ocular lens. An eyepiece, also called ocular lens, is a type of lens that is attached to a variety of optical devices such as telescopes and microscopes. The perimeter would then be surrounded by mana to prevent light from escaping. By creating an improvised refracting telescope, it would be possible to see distant scenery. This was called light scope, a support-type arcane magic. The in-game effect was just a simple zoom-in. If this was done too close to a character, the player would see through the polygons and see behind the character. The administrators should fix this. However, there was no human to be seen even after it was used. Is he under the sea? Yes, most likely. That wasn't surprising. As the name Pisces of the fish implied, he was unlike the other 12 stars whose activities were mostly on land. He was the type who could show his true worth only in the sea. His combat power was at its greatest in underwater combat. Therefore, it was only natural to expect him to be under the sea, but this was also why it was really troublesome. After all, the sea was much wider and deeper than land. In other words, the place that they needed to search was much larger than if it was on land. Furthermore, none of Ruppes' companions were particularly adept in moving around underwater. Naturally, this was also the case for Libra, Sagittarius, and Agacaros, who were in charge of searching for Pisces this time. In other words, they needed to make some preparations before diving into the sea. How long can each of you hold your breath? I don't need to breathe, so I can do so for any amount of time. I haven't tried, but it should be possible for a few hours. My best record is 45 minutes. The 3 of them answered Ruppes' question, and the difference between biological creatures and non-living creatures became apparent. As a non-living creature, Libra had no time limit. However, despite her appearance, she weighed 300 kilograms, so she would definitely sink if she was thrown into the sea. Ruppes wasn't sure what exactly Agacaros was, but he could probably be considered as a half-mana life form. He was halfway between a biological creature and a demon, but it didn't seem like he had completely lost the functions of a biological creature. Since Sagittarius was a centaur, a completely biological creature, his limit was less than an hour. Even though it was only 45 minutes, it was already an amazing feat after taking his race into consideration. This was like a human who could hold his breath underwater for more than 10 minutes. We need some countermeasures. Sagittarius, can you do it? Leave it to me. Oxygen suction. The effect of Sagittarius' divine magic, oxygen suction, was simply the collection of oxygen. This increased the oxygen absorption capabilities of living creatures, allowing them to take in oxygen that was dissolved in water as if they were on land. In short, it could simply be thought of as a skill that allowed one to breathe underwater. By the way, there was a penalty in the game if one were to enter underwater fields without using similar skills. HP would automatically decrease. However, Ruppes would simply charge without hesitation and force her way through, depending on her HP regeneration instead. One wouldn't need oxygen if it had overwhelming vitality. As such, Ruppes had probably said the realm of biological creatures. However, there was no reason to do the same thing in this world. Next, Libra. If I make some optional parts for underwater movement, it should be manageable. Ruppes said, and then entered the cabin to work on it. Then, after a while, there was the sound of iron striking iron, the sound of something breaking, and the sound of explosions. It didn't really sound like the process of manufacturing something, but N.O. Body Present particularly cared about that. If the youth SEI was here, he would have made a straight man retort, but unfortunately there was no one who would play that role here. Then, after waiting for a few minutes, Rupaz returned with something with several blue wings. It looked somewhat similar to Libra's support golem, Astrea. A closer look revealed 4 pairs of wings. In addition, 2 cannons extended from the waist when it was attached. However, it was missing the shoulder cannons of Astrea. It's done. This is a golem for underwater movement. Its name is Astrea Type M. There's a small screw at the end of each wing, which can be moved to change direction. The waist cannons can fire harpoons, which would pierce an opponent and deliver vibration and ultrasonic attack to destroy the body from within. If you equip this, you would be able to move freely in the water without sinking. Rupaz docked Astrea M onto Libra as she explained its functions. Libra tested it out immediately, firing an harpoon from the waist cannon. The fired harpoon was attached to a long wire, which extended to a far distance. Eventually, the harpoon fell into the sea and stabbed a shark-like magical beast which just happened to be there. This was a dangerous magical beast known as a deep blue, which liked to consume human flesh. When ultrasonic waves were emitted in the monster's body, the deep blue bled from its eyes and mouth before it stopped moving. With the harpoon piercing the corpse, the wire was wound back into the cannon and the shark corpse was hauled onto the Argo. This is a great piece of equipment. With this, I can definitely slaughter Eros. No, please bring him back normally instead of slaughtering him. While speaking, Libra's equipment was changed to prepare for underwater combat. Her favorite machine gun was mostly useless underwater, so it was left on the Argo. Instead, it was replaced by an underwater A.S. rifle made by Rupaz. Thus, she was now prepared for anything. And this is for Agakeros. After equipping Libra, Rupaz retrieved a weapon through a rift in S.P.A.ce created by Xgate. However, it was the wrong size. It was a huge death scythe that seemed to be emerging from the deck of the S.H.I+P. It was obviously intended to be used while enlarged since it wasn't a size that people could normally use. The length of the handle already reached 100 meters long. The blade glowed ominously as if a single slash could reap an entire city. As you can see, it's intended to be used when you A.S. giant form. You can store the weapon away in your shadow when you're not using it. Agakeros could merge with the shadows. Not just for himself, he could also do the same for clothes and other items. This was something that Ares and the others couldn't do. Even if they were given weapons to be used when they were in their giant forms, they didn't have a place to store the weapons. But Agakeros alone could do this. That was why only he could use this weapon, which required one to be in giant form. The huge size itself was its destructive power. In addition to STR plus 2000 attack adjustment, it also had an instant death effect. Of course, most boss CLA.S.S monsters were immune to instant death attacks, but weaker opponents would most definitely die. Thank you very much. With this, I can definitely slaughter Eros. Like I said, don't slaughter him. Just bring him back. Rupaz handed the weapon to Agakeros, who stored it in his shadow. The sight of handing over a 100-meter-long weapon with one hand was rather unrealistic, but there was still N.O. body around to make a straight man retort. After all, this was actually quite normal for them. Then, Sagittarius looked at Rupaz expectantly, but she didn't give him anything. You already have a weapon, right? I have nothing for you. Indeed, Sagittarius already had a weapon made by Rupaz. Therefore, he was the only one who didn't get anything. Sagittarius drooped his shoulders and sat on the floor, hugging his knees. But this gloomy man, whose lower body was naked, ended up being kicked off the S.H.I+P by Bennett Nash. When he debuted, he was so serious. This was just terrible. Then, we're going. Please wait for our good news. Libra and Agakeros jumped off the S.H.I+P one after another, diving into the sea with large splashes of water. It looked as easy as if they were diving into a pool, but the Argo was currently at an alt.I.2 of 10,000 meters for fuel efficiency. Commercial airlines usually fly at around 36,000 feet, 10,973 meters. The terminal velocity of a skydiver in a belly-to-earth, i.e., face-down, free-fall position is about 195 km per hour, 120 miles per hour, 54 m/s. So their falling speed would have reached 200 km per hour. Jumping into the sea at this speed was equivalent to smas.h.I plus ng directly into concrete, but Libra and the others did not take any damage. If they took damage from this, they couldn't be called the strongest golem or devil king in Midgard, where power balance was crazy. I can't find Sagittarius. Even though she was underwater, Libra spoke normally. Humans couldn't speak underwater, but she was a golem. She could speak underwater by emitting only sound without releasing air. In terms of the things known to Rupas and SEI, it was like playing music from underwater speakers. He probably has already started searching for Eros. Agok Eros also spoke as if he wasn't underwater. It seemed his voice was sing through the water via telepathy. They weren't particularly concerned about Sagittarius as he excelled in stealth. To begin with, he was someone who rarely showed himself even before his own allies. Although this had not been the case since the return of Rupas, what he was doing now could be said to be his original style. Since it was him, he would have started taking actions as a merfolk, just like how he had turned into a beastkin in Dropnir. Anyway, do you know where Eros is? I felt a reaction from there earlier. Let's go. Libra indicated the destination and flew through the water using the wings on her back. Likewise, Agok Eros followed as if he was flying. After swimming for a while, a strange group emerged to block their way. They were humanoid creatures whose heads had mutated into those of fishes. Were they mermen? This appearance was really weird. They were probably mermen, but this group was really eerie. Their arms were drooping and swaying left and right. They were dragging their tails on the seabed and they moved by jumping like frogs. Their faces were very distinctive and their appearances were very disturbing. It was as if they were deep-sea mermen. Are those merfolk? I don't know. Whatever it is, since they're in the way, all we need to do is to eliminate them. Agok Eros moved his right arm and a giant demonic arm instantly materialized, holding a huge scythe. Flash. The demonic arm moved as Agok Eros moved his own arm and the scythe killed the merman instantly. The two of them said over the mutilated corpses without changing their expressions or looking back. It's a species that we didn't see before 200 years ago. Was it a mutation? Maybe. In the deep sea, mana tends to concentrate densely like it does in my homeland, Helheim. It won't be strange if they have similar mutations as ours as a result. Mana had the property of flowing from high to low. The reason for this had been studied for many years, but it hadn't been fully understood. The only thing that was certain was that mana tended to accu.malate easily underground and in the deep sea. In fact, a high concentration of mana had accu.malated in Helheim, the underground world. As a result, the creatures there had demonic mutations. The humanoids were no exception. The humanoids in Helheim mutated to become as similar to devils as possible, becoming the ancestors of vampires. Therefore, it was no wonder if the same thing was happening in the deep sea. Presumably, the merfolk had completely become magical beasts under the influence of mana. This was probably a new generation of monsters that were as yet unnoticed by the G.O.Dis. Eros and these unknown magical beasts, this is becoming a little annoying. This doesn't change what we have to do. We just have to fulfill our master's order. That goes without saying. It didn't matter whether the enemy was known or strong. Unshaken, Libra and Agok Eros continued to swim towards their destination. Eventually, they arrived at the glorious capital of the sea. https://handofvecna.blogspot.com Author's notes. There have been frequent requests for, so I have added it before chapter 1. I don't think there's any problem if you skip it, but if you can't grasp the characters properly, please look it up. Midgard, G.O.Dis Sama. There's a bug in the deep sea. G.O.Dis, ugh, Not again. Today's bug, Deep One. The Deep Ones are a race of intelligent ocean-dwelling creatures in the Cthulhu mythos of H.P. Lovecraft. They are approximately human-shaped but with a fishy appearance. They regularly mate with humans along the coast, creating societies of hybrids. They were first featured in The Shadow over Innsmouth. It's a mutation of merfolk in the deep sea, completely becoming magical beasts. The species was similar to devils like Agakeros. Born in dense mana, they had high combat power. Their average level was 100, but in the deep sea world, they were just disposable lower CLA.S.S monsters. They had the Innsmouth look. Astrea type M length, 1.5 m weight, 280 kilograms primary armament, Anchor Buster X2, attack power 9500, fixed, secondary armament, Automatic Seeking Wing Cutter X8, attack power 5000, fixed. Astrea type M's attack power is independent of Libra, so it is fixed regardless of Libra's own values. Author, Firehead, Translator, Hand of Vecna Editors, TPSTT, Key. https://handofvecna.blogspot.com. I see. I understand what you mean. The royal chamber of the undersea palace was normally inaccessible to all except the king, Pisces, and his chosen female. Currently, 4 people were having a conversation across the table. No, more accurately, only 3 people were speaking. The mermaid named Sure, who had been brought along because she was chosen by Pisces, didn't seem to be keeping up with the situation and was merely looking on silently. Libra and Agakeros finished explaining the return of Rupas and everything that had happened so far. Pisces merely acknowledged them and nodded. The return of Rupasama is something to rejoice about. There's no doubt about that. But why are the 2 of you here? Why not one of the others? Like Pollux, Ares, or someone who's actually better? I see. We seem to be unwelcomed. Would you prefer Scorpius and Leon instead? Stop joking. If they had come, I'd have left them at the door. A berserk lesbian and a muscular idiot? No, thank you. Especially Leon, it's too much to even look at him. Pisces basically judged people by their physical beauty. Was it only to be expected of the child of Alovenus, who was also called the G.O.Dis of beauty? He essentially hated ugly people and those who were excessive. Libra, who was merely a beautiful object, and Agakeros, who embodied the negative aspects of the world, were not welcomed visitors. If someone from the 12 stars were to visit him, he would rather it be someone comforting to the eyes like Pollux or Ares. Of course, this was assuming that Ares maintained his humanoid form. By the way, the person whom he didn't want here the most was a perverted horse that walked around with its lower body exposed. He had no good memories of that horse. Once, he met a girl in town and took a liking to her, but she turned out to be the perverted horse in disguise. Even now, that experience was still traumatic for him. Also, cease calling me Eros. Don't you already have Taurus to mess around with by mistaking his name? What are you saying? It's completely different. Taurus' name is so confusing that it's natural to make mistakes without any malicious intent. In your case, we're getting your name wrong on purpose. That's even worse. Well, it's not like we've made a mistake, right? After all, Eros is your real name. Isn't that right, Eros? That's how it is, Eros. B.A.S.T.A.R.ds, Pisces grumbled while resting his cheek on his hand. He thought, this is why I hate these people. The sensible Pollux and good-natured Ares would not have deliberately called him by his real name. Ares might sometimes do so accidentally, but at least there was no malicious intent. However, these 2 were different, especially Agakeros, who was full of malice. He didn't know what Libra was thinking. It was rather strange for her to be malicious, yet she still called him by his real name. Seriously, why are the 12 stars full of weirdos? Pisces seemed to have forgotten himself as he became deeply lost in thought. By the way, why are you referring to yourself in the same way as Rupasama? It's rude to our master. Ugh, Pisces grunted at Agakeros' reproach. As Agakeros said, Pisces' use of the first-person P.R.O. noun was in imitation of Rupas. At least, Agakeros and the others knew that, before Pisces had met Rupas, he had been addressing himself as or. This part is difficult to translate into English, since there's only one singular first-person p.r.o. noun in English, but that's not the case in J.A. Paints. Basically, Pisces originally used the first-person p.r.o. noun or, but changed to the archaic first-person p.r.o. noun yo, in order to imitate Rupas. See list of J.A. Pain's personal p.r.o. nouns for more details. Sama. In addition, they had probably noticed that all of the females in the palace were similar to Rupas in some way. Well, whatever. More importantly, Pisces quickly changed the topic as he was unwilling to continue this conversation. This was this and that was that. There was no need to let the goat tell him how he should address himself. I'd like to witness the return of Rupas myself, but right now is a bad time. Are you saying that there's something that takes precedence over our master? That just shows how deep your love is. Shut up. It's so annoying how you twist everything that I say. Unlike you, I'm the king of the vast nation of the sea. It covers 70% of Midgard's surface. As king, I'm different from you people who have nothing to protect. Pisces spread his arms wide as Libra and Agakeros looked at him coldly. Their faces showed signs of exasperation and seemed to be saying, "Is it starting again?" However, Pisces didn't seem to care what they were thinking. The unified nation of the Great Sea, Skplanir, consists of 180 territories, 300 cities, and 100 million people. In the history of Midgard, has there ever been a king who ruled over such a vast territory? Rupasama once unified the world. Ah, my talent as a king frightens even myself. This king, who could do so much in just 200 years, is truly a supreme treasure above everything else in this world. And this sea kingdom will be an engagement ring for my beloved. Do you understand the difference? You people are simply peasants, while I'm a glorious king. Don't put me on the same level as you. Yes, yes. Weros is a J.A. Pain's internet slang that means laughter, similar to LOL. In this chapter, it is made to rhyme with Eros, Weros. Yes, yes. Eros, Eros. ub.a.s.t.a.r.ds. Although what Pisces had said sounded like narcissistic self-praise, what he had achieved was actually quite amazing. Purely in terms of territory, he was superior even to the Demon King. Currently, the demons dominated over 90% of the world, while the humanoids lived in a small area that was less than 10% of the land. But in the end, this only accounted for the land, which was merely 30% of the whole of Midgard. The remaining 70%, which consisted of the vast world of the sea, was under the rule of Pisces. Certainly, this achievement could not be ignored. Bringing him back to Rupas would mean that the sea kingdom of Skplanir would become her ally. In an instant, the spheres of influence of Rupas and the Demon King would be turned upside down. The power balance would be completely reversed. But currently, my kingdom has a problem. Is it because of your narcissism? That's certainly a big problem. No, you fools. Currently, we are at war with the mutant invaders known as the Deep Ones. Hearing about the war, Libra and Agakeros glanced at each other. That didn't sound like something that should be troubling one of the 12 stars. Wasn't that a problem that could be solved by any one of the 12 stars with their overwhelming combat power? It didn't matter whether the enemies were in the thousands or tens of thousands. One could simply use wide area annihilation magic to wipe them out by virtue of the absolute difference in level. The 12 stars, especially those members who were combatants, could certainly do so. There was only one combatant who could not because he was a crab that was useless except to serve as as.h.i plus eld. The Deep Ones, are they the merfolk who look like deep-sea fish? You've encountered them? Yes, they're those ugly folk who dare to challenge me because they don't know their place. They can't be eradicated nor driven out of the sea. The beautiful kingdom that I've built is being ruined by them. Then you should just annihilate them all. The ones I fought were just a bunch of worthless small fries. Those were just the vanguard. The real problem is the one who's hiding behind them. Pisces clicked his tongue sullenly and roughly brushed his hair. Their general is called the evil G.O.D of the sea. I don't know when exactly it came into being, but it seems to have dwelled in the deep sea for a fairly long time. To put it simply, it is a marine mutant that was transformed by Mana. Agakeros, it is a natural being like you. Just think of it as a monster whose birth was unintended by the G.O.Dis. Is it strong? Yeah, quite significantly. Although we only had a little skirmish, its combat power is comparable to that of the 12 stars. When it comes to underwater combat, it may be on par with the Dragon King. 12 stars CLA.S. Hearing this, the look of contempt vanished from the faces of Libra and Agakeros. A monster that formed naturally as a result of mana mutation was by no means an easy opponent to deal with. After all, the 12 stars and the former subordinates of Rupas were a group of such individuals. Basically, Karkinos, Scorpius, Agakeros, Phoenix, and Hydrus were all included in this group. Are the Deep Ones that same kind of being? No, they are a new species that came into being in the last 200 years. All sinners who violate the dignity of the Sea Kingdom are not killed and are instead generously banished to the deep sea. Over time, they transform into magical beasts who now serve the evil G.O.D. Isn't this problem completely self-inflicted? Oh, is it only male merfolk who were banished? You fools would never understand my Zion. Since Pisces favored the females, it was mostly the males who were sent to the deep sea. Therefore, there were no females among the Deep Ones and they would become extinct if this situation persisted. In other words, this was a war for survival to them. Simply put, the A.S. salts were their way of saying, send us some females, UC.R.A.PPY harem B.A.S.T.A.R.D. This was such a wretched reason for war. The evil G.O.D who got caught in the middle of this and had to play along was really pitiful. Actually, wasn't it a rather nice magical beast? For going out of its way to play along? At least, it was commendable that it had done nothing wrong despite having so much power at its disposal until now. I understand. In that case, let's work together. How troublesome. Let's eradicate the Deep Ones quickly. It didn't matter to Libra and Agakeros what would happen to the merfolk. However, if this became part of Rupa's territory, it would be a different matter. It would be unacceptable to present the master with a ruined wasteland as a gift. Furthermore, if the evil G.O.D was left alone, it might get in the way of their master sooner or later. There was no reason not to help. Help, huh? Regardless of your personalities, your combat power is still reliable. Fine. Pisces, will make a special allowance for you to help. Be thankful. Well, even if you're not here, I'll still manage somehow. Right, let's go back, Agakeros. We'll just say that Eros is dead. Wait, don't go. I understand. I'm grateful. I'll be grateful, so please help. At the sight of Libra and Agakeros turning to leave, Pisces abandoned his arrogant mask and cried for help. After all, Pisces was desperate to deal with the situation and the A.S. Sistance of 2 of the 12 stars was something he found irresistible. He had to resolve this matter somehow, otherwise he couldn't return to Rupas. This was basically torture for him. All right. Then, let's take the fight to the enemy immediately. We're going now? I haven't even formed an army yet. We don't need something like that, right? We are sufficient by ourselves. When it came to war, quant.I.Ti weighed more than quality. This was an absolute truth that had not changed since ancient times and would continue to hold true in the future. The side with more troops would be the victor. War was basically like this. Of course, various factors like strategies, tactics, weapons, terrains, and weather could enable an overwhelmed minority to defeat the majority. However, the first thing that should be considered would always be numbers. The fact that a larger number was more advantageous would never change. However, they were the walking disasters known as the tyrannical 12 stars. The theories of war simply did not apply to disasters. No matter how large an army was, if 3 huge meteors fell, the country would still be easily destroyed. I wonder if your life as a king has become too long and dull. Who are you talking to? I'm Pisces, the son of the G.O.Dis. Something like that wouldn't happen to me. Pisces laughed at Libra's provocation and opened the palace's doors. The surrounding merfolk were watching to see what was happening, but they wouldn't have guessed that the three of them intended to assault the enemy camp by themselves. We're moving out. Don't fall behind, peasants. Who are you calling a peasant, Eros? I'll go ahead first, Eros. Call me Pisces. Pisces snapped his fingers. The thin Hagioromo that he was wearing earlier was instantly replaced by a golden, tasteless armor. He had a mantle on his back and a trident in his hand. In addition, a giant, 30-meter-long killer whale responded to his call to move out. The Orver cried and he got on its back. Ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha. The king of the sea laughed in a tasteless manner with his arms crossed on the Orver's back. After that, the two followed after him with a stunned look. As the underwater city shrank away in the distance, the three of them entered the deep sea. Several deep ones appeared to block their way, but they were just small fries. The ultrasonic waves emitted by the Orver enveloped them, causing them to bleed from every hole in their bodies. They were then preyed upon and torn apart by sharp teeth. Pisces had raised his Orver pet to level 500. At least, Pisces didn't have to fight personally if they were just small fries. https://handofvecna.blogspot.com Image from Light Novel Volume 7. Author's notes Orver A. Hey. I'm Rus.H.I plus NG into a battle involving the 12 stars when I'm only level 500. Orver B. He's gonna die. Orver C. Whatever. The opponent is the mutant evil G.O.D. Orver D. Oh, that's a big deal, isn't it? He's gonna die. Author, Firehead, Translator, Hand of Vecna Editors, TPSTT, Key. https://handofvecna.blogspot.com The deep sea was a world full of mysteries despite being on the same planet as other places. Not just in Midgard, but even in SEI's home world where science had progressed much further than in this world, the whole picture had not been fully revealed. Deep-sea creatures were often different from the types of fish that humans would usually see. They often had strange and unique evolutions. For example, there were fish with transparent heads. Is a fish recognized for a highly unusual transparent, fluid-filled dome on its head, through which the lenses of its eyes can be seen. Jellyfish that glowed 7 different colors. Mertensia ovum, also called Arctic comb jelly, is weakly bioluminescent in blues and greens, producing a rainbow effect similar to that seen on an oil slick. Creatures that looked like spiders. Sea spiders, also called pycnogonids, are marine arthropods that are found in oceans around the world. There are over 1,300 known species, with a leg span ranging from 1 mm, 0.04 in, to over 70 centimeters, 2.3 feet. They are not true spiders, or even arachnids. Strangely shaped fish. The pelican eel, also called, is a deep-sea fish whose loosely hinged mouth can be opened wide enough to swallow a fish much larger than the eel itself. That could open their mouths so wide that their jaws seem to be broken. And squids with transparent bodies. The GLA.S.S squid, also called cranch squid, is a family of squids with about 60 different species. Its common name is derived from the transparent nature of most species. There was even an organism. Tardigrades, known colloquially as water bears, are a phylum of water-dwelling 8-legged segmented microanimals. They are found everywhere, from mountaintops to the deep sea and mud volcanoes. Tardigrades are among the most resilient animals known and are usually about 0.5 millimeters, 0.02 in, long when fully grown. That wouldn't die at a temperature of absolute zero. Absolute zero is the lowest limit of the thermodynamic temperature scale. By international agreement, absolute zero is taken as 273.15 degrees C, or 459.67 degree F. Or when exposed to radiation that would kill most living things. It could survive without water in a dry state for 10 years. It could calmly exist in a vacuum and even survive in outer s.p.a.ce. Visit https://handofvecna.blogspot.com for full text. Image from Light Novel Volume 7. Author's notes. It's probably the strongest character who is unrelated to this story. It has no connection to the G.O.Dis or Ruppas. Oh well. Moon, what did I even do to deserve this? Today's bug, mutant G.O.D, Thulhu, is modeled after Thulhu, or a great old one who combined the features of a human, an octopus, and a dragon. Level, 1000 HP, 2,800,000 SP, 66,666 Attribute, Water STR, Strength 6000 Dex, Dexterity 2000 VIT, Vitality 6200 Int, Intelligence 5800 AGI, Agility 5000 MND, Mind 9999 Luck, Luck 2000 Mental interference occurs randomly every few seconds. Without resistance, you can't even fight it in the first place. Immune to all conditions except for sleep. Immune to instant death effects. Immune to mental manipulation. HP regeneration 99,999. Can make a number of normal attacks equal to the number of its tentacles. Currently 120 consecutive attacks. Normal attacks have a 90% chance of triggering mental interference. Without countermeasures against mental attacks, you wouldn't be able to do anything. Regeneration increases the number of tentacles. Height, 120 meters. Unique skill, He Waits Dreaming, is part of a chant A.S. associated with Thulhu cultists, PHNGLUI MGLWNAF Thulhu Arlai Uganagulftan. This line is normally translated into English as, in his house at Arlai, dead Thulhu waits dreaming. The J.A. Payne's translation is, When its HP reaches 0, it falls asleep instead of dying. After a few hundred years, its status will increase further and it will revive. Unique skill, The Call of the Evil G.O.D. The Call of the Evil G.O.D. is obviously a reference to the Call of Thulhu. You can watch of the Call of Thulhu by overly sarcastic productions. Telepathy on a global scale, eroding and repainting the real world with one's dreams. IAIA is a word often used by the cultists of the Thulhu mythos. The shadow over Innsmouth features the phrase, IA. Thulhuftan. Also, the Dunwich Horror features the phrase, IA. Shubnigurath, which is also invoked by Inzoulgaun in of Overlord 3 anime. IA. This dream world operates only by the laws of the evil God. It ignores the laws of Alovinus, which are supposed to be absolute. However, it is currently unusable due to the large amount of sea water. And yet the evil G.O.D. still calls itself the G.O.D. of water? Alovinus, oh, I see. It's a dream. I should hurry and wake up. The G.O.Dis wasn't involved in the birth of this and.I.Tai. By the way, Pisces is not an Ouroboros, but a magic similar to it. Or perhaps, he is a poor prototype. In other words, he is like Levia, being a mockery of an Ouroboros. Translator's notes: why isn't Pisces a fish? As mentioned in, Astrea is basically modeled after Freedom Gundam. If the description of Astrea M didn't seem obvious enough, the detachment of the wings in this chapter should be evident enough that Astrea M is based on. A wild last boss appeared. Author, Firehead, Translator, Hand of Vecna Editors, TPSTT, Key. What does it mean to be undefeatable? What does it mean to have strength that would never lose? For those who fought, it was an eternal proposition as well as a goal to strive for. How could the vast amount of skills, divine magic, and arcane magic be combined to create an absolutely unbeatable existence? Anyone who had reached level 100 would have thought about this at least once. One of them, the vampire princess Bennett Nash, reached her own answer. It involved high HP and percentage HP regeneration. A law existed that restricted the upper limit of damage in Midgard to less than 100,000. Therefore, if one's maximum HP was increased to the point where the percentage HP regeneration would recover 99,999, then the damage taken would be nullified in the next moment, no matter what kind of attack it was. Theoretically, it would be impossible to lose. In fact, Bennett Nash herself embodied this principle, as any damage done to her would be fully healed in an instant. Of course, this wasn't the only thing that made her powerful, but one could say that defense was her greatest A.S. set. Therefore, She never needed to take any defensive actions during combat and could focus only on attacks without hiding any card up her sleeve. And right now, there was another being that perfectly embodied this principle. The mutant G.O.D howled. Its form, voice, and scent, everything that it was composed of, caused intense discomfort in others, turning sanity into madness. Despite its nightmarish existence, Agakeros stood before it without any mental disturbance. After all, Agakeros was the Devil King whose existence would reduce one's sanity, so they were evenly matched in that sense. The huge evil G.O.D and Devil King fought once more as Libra looked up at them and muttered. The time required for its wounds to start regenerating is 0.05 second. The time required for complete recovery is 0.6 second. This is rather troubling, isn't it? Pisces frowned upon hearing her mechanical voice. It took less than a second to complete its regeneration. The speed was so fast that it would be imperceivable to normal humanoids and magical beasts. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that it was almost completely healed at the same time it was damaged. Of course, they could cut in before it was completely healed. It was certainly possible to launch an attack within 1/100th of a second and damage it before its regeneration could start. No matter how ridiculous the speed of its regeneration was, it could be overwhelmed by a barrage of attacks that was even faster. In other words, they could just hit it faster than it could regenerate. For example, if Bennett Nash was here, she could hit the mutant G.O.D with dozens of light attacks in the time it took to regenerate once. It would be almost dead in an instant. Ironically, the most effective way to overwhelm Bennett Nash's invincibility was her own fighting style. Although it would be slightly slower, Ruppas could also overwhelm an opponent with a similar barrage of attacks. However, neither the Vampire Princess nor the Black-Winged Overlord was here. Instead, it was Agakeros, Libra, and Pisces. We just need to damage it faster than it can regenerate. That's all. That's not realistic, considering that its level is higher than ours. It isn't a sandbag that can be beaten without it fighting back. It's not possible to attack it unilaterally. Pisces made a proposition while evading the attacking tentacles, but it was shot down by Libra immediately. As mentioned before, attacking faster than its regeneration was certainly a solution. It wasn't a mistake. However, the opponent would naturally fight back, defend, and evade. It might even use skills to heal itself further. In other words, there must be an overwhelming difference in speed in order to implement this tactic, such that one must move to a smaller time scale and leave the opponent behind. But the speed of the mutant G.O.D and Libra and the others were about the same. Naturally, this was an ultra-high-speed battle that took place on a different time scale and could not be followed by ordinary combatants. The aforementioned tactic would not be easy to implement when they were fighting on the same stage. Besides, we fortunately have someone who is the natural enemy of regeneration specialists. Just watch. Libra pointed her finger at the side of the evil God. This was the spot where Agakeros had damaged it earlier, but it still had not regenerated. The head, which was pierced by Libra's harpoons, and the body, which was burned by Pisces' roar, had almost completely regenerated. Only that wound persisted without regenerating. Agakeros' attacks inflicted an irreversible curse. Once wounded, the damage could not be healed until the curse expired after a certain period of time. Divine magic and using items were ineffective. Even amputating the damaged part would not help. Furthermore, even elixirs and Amrita were useless against this ability. In other words, Agakeros was the natural enemy of the mutant God. Is your plan to just rely on him? I don't really care for that. In that case, would you like to be the main attacker? Your unique skill is called Alreska. Alreska, also called Alpha Piscium, is a binary star in the constellation of Pisces. Its name is derived from Arabic, meaning the cord. There are some variations in its spelling, such as Alriska, Alriska, and Alrisha, right? But, well, you can't use it, right? Stop joking. I'm not going to use it on such an ugly opponent. That's what I thought, so please don't complain and stay focused on providing support. Whatever. Start fighting already. How much longer do I have to fight by myself? Agakeros shouted at both of them, who were still discussing tactics. He had been hitting the evil G.O.D all this time and it was starting to get tough. Libra immediately took action without answering his question. She bent her knees out of her skirt as if preparing to jump. The parts that were not usually visible due to being covered by the skirt had the characteristic joints of a golem. The parts that were her knees opened up and fired sh.e.l.ls from within. They hit the evil G.O.D and exploded, while Pisces immediately followed up with an attack. Maelstrom. This high-level water attribute arcane magic created a swirl of water to attack the enemy, hitting the evil G.O.D and sealing its movements. However, Agakeros did not take the opportunity to escape. As if he had been waiting for this, he shot a black bolt that bored into the evil G.O.D's chest. But the evil G.O.D's vitality was not to be trifled with. After being shaken momentarily, it moved all its tentacles as if it had received no damage. They struck in all directions towards the three of them. Full text add image from Manga Volume 4.